Well, I was pleasantly surprised to find that the election went the way that it did. I must admit, I was expecting a lot more long-term, you know, hustling, if that makes sense. I was expecting probably the result we got, but not quite as extensive as the result was. And so I don't know. It feels like there's something that we need to say as liberty-minded people, um, because Trump is not necessarily going to be the solution. The people who are treating him as if he is some kind of savior of the republic, savior of America, I think they're overstating their case. And, you know, there's definitely scenarios in which things can turn around here, but that's going to depend on us. And so I wrote a little bit about what we still need to do if we actually value liberty and not just Republican victories, right? Um, if we actually want to achieve smaller government, less intrusive government, more personal freedom, our job is far from over. In fact, our job has gotten bigger now because there's at least a chance that Trump and his people will listen to people who want liberty, as opposed to, the opposite side where liberty is not even a motivating issue. So bear with me for a minute, but I've got a couple of points that I want to go over that explain what we need to continue doing in order to keep pushing in this direction, because this is not the time to stop. This is the time to focus and be even more aware of what's going on, because, at least this side might listen. So here we go. This was a historic win. It wasn't just the Electoral College. It was the popular vote, the House, the Senate. Thank goodness we aren't going to have to listen to any more ignorant, short-sighted gibberish about the Electoral College for the next 4 years, I hope. I mean, I guess stupid enough people might still complain about the Electoral College, but it shouldn't be an issue, I would hope. However, it's important to remember that the progressives, the people who feel entitled to rule you and me, aren't done. They're not done by a long shot. It's up to us to ensure that Trump is not merely a 4-year speed bump on the path to what they call the end of history. And what does the end of history mean to these progressives, to these would-be rulers of us? They will cover it in these velvet terms of friendly democracy, of comfort, of prosperity, of consensus even. But what they always leave out is the iron fist that lays under the velvet. Its hard, unswerving grip on every aspect of your life, its power to strip you of everything in the name of some vague good somewhere else in the world, and most of all, is its absolute immunity to any of your protests. Think about, for instance, the wailing that we got when some Britons decided that they didn't want to be ruled by unaccountable bureaucrats in Brussels. That's what we're up against, only more so. It's important to remember that these mentally ill people who are fake crying on TikTok or whatever, they're not the real danger. They're in it for clicks, and they're in it for the ego stroking for their own fellow crazies. They are just one of the many smokescreens that your would-be rulers are encouraging in order to keep you busy. The people who really intend to rule over us are now absolutely determined to ensure that Trump's influence on the government is minimal, as it was between 2016 and 2020. That they will be right back on track toward that undisputed, unchecked rulership over your life in just four more years. They have at their disposal edifices that they have built up over the last over 100 years. The central bank, the federal regulatory apparatus, the corporate media. Don't be surprised when they paint Trump and all of his colleagues as fascist, Nazis, far-right, authoritarians, totalitarians, anything at all to attack him for the next 4 years. We've already seen it, so we're going to probably expect it to continue. If the American political process goes as it usually does, they also now know that Vance is probably going to be the next presidential candidate for the Republicans. And therefore, we must also expect an unending and constantly escalating stream of slander against him. If liberty-minded people don't keep the pressure up, if they don't counter these slurs with calm, convincing, and well-sourced rebuttals, We should also expect things to get worse, not just after Trump is out of office, but maybe even during the next 4 years. We need to expect them to provide plenty of branches for us to hack at in an attempt to protect the roots. Expect an endless supply of frivolous legal challenges and knots made of red tape. Expect them to promise a fountain of free stuff to people who are on the fence, too. Recall that Thoreau wrote in Walden, "There are 1,000 hacking at the branches of evil to one striking at the root." We have to try our hardest to do the opposite, to remain laser-focused on the heart of the problem and not be distracted by the branches that the state apparatus is going to throw up at us as bait. There's a lot that the state can do without Trump or Congress's approval to micromanage your life, and throwing up smokescreens for what they're doing is these bureaucrats' bread and butter. They will try to hide their operations from Trump's administration in the same way that the military-industrial complex hid soldiers in war zones from Trump's previous administration. Remember, these people, these progressives, believe that they are working in the service of the collective good, which just so happens to put them in positions of authority. They believe in many cases that the ends justify the means. They believe that the average person is merely a chess piece, to be moved about to serve their perceptions of what the collective needs. And they have no qualms about throwing chess pieces away and getting new ones that will follow their orders better. Because that's what they want. They don't want thinking people. They want mindless pieces that will follow orders. Pieces that see their rulers with awe and not as the worst merely getting on top, to paraphrase Hayek. They want pieces that will own nothing and be happy. We need to hope, and we need to make an effort to ensure that none of them do something irreversible in the next 2.5 months, like starting a war or something like that. And even after that, too, there's going to be attempts to get people to do things that will make things go their way. We need to ensure that they can't act without oversight, in the shadows like they like to do, for the next 4 years at least, and even beyond that. We must also be aware that they are going to try to influence Trump and his administration through lies and through omitted truths into enacting as many of their totalitarian impulses as they can. And we've already seen in the previous Trump administration that he is extremely, not gullible necessarily, but he's amenable to being convinced of really stupid ideas and hiring really awful people. They, the progressives, the people who want to rule you and me with an iron fist covered in a thin layer of friendly-looking velvet, fully expect to establish themselves as unaccountable and permanent rulers as soon as they possibly can. And 4 more years is not that long of a wait for them. It's up to us to make sure that their plans don't come to fruition, now or in the future. Keep your powder dry, keep your eyes peeled, and keep your ears open. The fight is not over, not by a long shot. So, that's what I wrote about this. I don't know. I am vaguely hopeful that that at least things will be a little bit better in the next 4 years, but I'm not sure about that because, as we saw, we might get what did I use? I've called it death by 1,000 Boltons before. We might get a bunch of neocons trying to worm their way into government again. We're going to probably have more neocons and warmongers trying to retake over the Republican Party. There's a good, strong anti-war current going through the Republican Party right now that we as liberty-loving people should try to ride it as far as we can possibly ride it. If we can get the wars in Gaza and the Ukraine dealt with in some reasonable way, some kind of peace deal, that would be fantastic. But we must expect that people are going to push to keep those things worse and to make them and to escalate them without any, because they don't expect that they'll ever feel any real consequences from the wars that they advocate for. No, they expect all of that horribleness to fall on regular American people and for them to use it as another reason for them to get more power. That's kind of how it works. They do something horrible, the people complain, and they say, well, I'll fix the problem by doing this other thing. Repeat and, wash, rinse, repeat, do again. Right now, libertarians have a chance to, not just libertarians, but like people who love liberty in general, right? I don't want to partify this, right? We actually have an administration that might listen to us in some ways if we can make good arguments. We have people who are, in the area. We will know whether Trump is going to do good things or not based on his first day. Do we end up with with Ross? Does he free Ross or not? If yes, then maybe we have a chance. If no, well, expect another 4 years of things that look good on the surface but are not. Yeah. It would be really nice if this was actually a turning point. I'll say that, and there might actually be something we can do to make this into a turning point by being careful and arguing carefully, and having, because the other side is hysterical, right? They're screaming constantly that that this is that this is fascism, this is Nazism. I mean, to be perfectly honest, the United States slouched into fascism back in the 1930s, and we never really got out of it. There's so much regulation on business that we're not really that far away from a Mussolini's Italy, if we really think about how much regulatory power they actually had. And these are people who just use fascism as a slur against things that they don't like, whereas anything that they do like is obviously good and therefore should be lauded, even when it corresponds with doctrinaire Mussolini fascism. It's that kind of ignorance that needs to get fought, right? We need to better understand, and we need to maintain and improve our understanding of the founding philosophy of America, because we've lost so much of it, right? We had a really good, mostly Lockean thing going on, and I've been going through Locke's two treatises again, and really kind of looking at it from like a voluntarist perspective, and there's definitely something there. Like he's got some issues in there where he makes some assumptions that don't quite follow, but at the same time, government as servant is better than government as master, right? Abolition of coercive statehood is probably not on the table right now, as much as maybe that's what we'd like to do. But voluntary, privatizing a bunch of stuff might be on the table. And so, I mean, I think step one is probably just to make sure that a bunch of neocons don't end up in the next administration. Fortunately, some libertarians have actually made progress in that kind of diplomatic contact between good anti-state libertarians and the and Trump's potential administration. So hopefully we see some movement there. Again, watch for Free Ross, because he did promise it. I don't worry so much about having "quote unquote" a libertarian in the administration. I don't know what exactly that means, and that's one of those things where he could get some kind of Cato Institute vaccine mandator, and he would he could perfectly well call that a libertarian. But if you actually see Ross Ulbricht getting freed, then that might mean that we're in for a 4 years where we can actually make a difference and possibly have a pretty significant effect on the size and scope and invasiveness of the state. And that would be something that I would love to see. But, I'm not going to hold my breath. So with that, hack at the root, not at the branches, just as Thoreau advised, at least an implication. And keep your eyes open, because this is not over. I've often called the Republicans the party of broken promises, and our goal right now is to make sure that all of their best promises don't go by the wayside as soon as political, capital becomes a factor. Because it's very easy to get promises out of someone, but it's not very easy to get them to actually expend their own political capital on fulfilling those promises. And this is kind of what Republicans do. They talk a big deal about freedom, and they fail at almost every turn. And it is our task to make sure that if they do fail, if they are failing the principles of limited government, that these things are brought out and shown to the people, so that we know that once again we have a party of broken promises. I'm cautiously optimistic, but we'll see. Let's see. I'm thinking that my next project is actually going to be a voluntarist take on Locke's second treatise of government. The first treatise doesn't really need to be handled in that much detail. I'll probably do a little bit on it in the introduction. But I'm thinking about going through this because I hear a lot of anarchists, saying things that, well, first off, I keep hearing people argue that Locke's state of nature is not what it actually is in the book, which I think is I think it's like Rousseau getting packed in with Locke, and I think that's a major problem that we have these days. I also see a lot of I don't know how to describe it exactly, but and I'm not entirely unsympathetic to it, but it's screaming about the principle of screaming that X is a fundamental principle of anarchism, whereas if you actually read Locke's second treatise and you're aware of the few things in it that are, I think, incorrect, you can make a pretty good case for a voluntarist government, for a non-coercive government based on the Lockean framework. And that's what I think I'm going to work on next. I don't know. That's all I've got for you for today. That's my plan. I'm gonna go through. I'm gonna go through this and take some notes, and just keep your ear to the ground, because things are going to be really weird for the next 4 years. Are we going to get some actual reduction in the size of the state, or are we going to end up with a bunch of manufactured emergencies ballooning the state even more monetarily, and then Trump gets out, somebody else gets in, and we're back to exactly where we were, a week ago? I hope that things get a little bit better, but we will see. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And I'll see you later.